You smell that? Smells like a fresh loaf of that sweet, sweet daily bread. Today's little nugget of wisdom comes to us from Thubten Yeshe, and he says, I hope that you understand what the word spiritual really means. It means to search for, to investigate the true nature of the mind. There is nothing spiritual outside. Spiritual means the mind, and spiritual people are those who seek its nature. As I mentioned in other videos, when I first embarked on this journey of exploration that I'm still on, one of the first things that caught me off guard was the fact that I didn't know much of anything. And so very early on, I began to question some of my most basic presuppositions about a variety of matters. Everything from God to beauty, truth, goodness. I started to question what these things actually meant. One of the words that I realized I didn't really know much about was the word spiritual. It was one of those words that I always assumed I knew the meaning of, but when I started to actually delve into it and to try and explain to myself what spirituality is and what spiritual means, I found myself struggling. The things that are most present and the most obvious are often the things that we fail to question. So when I started thinking about what it means to be spiritual, and when I started to investigate this term, I very quickly found that it wasn't anything like I had originally suspected. So what does it mean to be spiritual? What is the spirit? Probably the biggest revelation I had on this topic was when I was just messing around and looking at definitions of words. So I was trying to figure out what the word psyche means, because this is another one of these nebulous terms that we just take for granted. We talk about psychology or psychedelics, but we never really talk about the psyche and what it is, even though it's the topic of an entire discipline. Even though each and every single one of us has a psyche, we never actually take the time to figure out what this thing is and how it affects us. So I started looking around, I started researching, and very quickly I stumbled onto a definition of psyche that kind of blew my mind. Because it said that the psyche was roughly the same thing as the spirit, the mind, and the soul. So the psyche, the soul, the mind, the spirit, these are all different words for the same thing. At least that's my conclusion. And it would seem that Thubten Yeshe has reached a similar conclusion himself. According to him, the word spiritual simply indicates the search for and the study of the mind and its underlying nature. In other words, it is the pursuit of inner truth and inner freedom. And so we can equate spirituality with psychology, because what is psychology? The study of the mind, how it functions, how it relates to the physical brain. Well, this is one aspect of spirituality, and I think it's one that is often overlooked. So there's nothing woo-woo or weird or religious about it. Being spiritual simply means exploring the inner world of the psyche and seeking to understand how it works and how we can involve ourselves with it in a more functional way. And of course, as you begin to study the mind and understand its nature and its mechanisms, and to also take charge of the mind, well, this obviously has a huge impact and effect on the outside world. So it's not just an abstract or theoretical pursuit. It's one that has real effects on your material circumstances and the way you look at those circumstances. So I found that this was an interesting quote because it clarified a lot of misconceptions that I used to have about spirituality, and it also takes some of the religious fundamentalist sort of edge off and really just breaks spirituality down to its most basic function, which is exploring, understanding, and mastering the mind. That's it for me. Thanks for joining us, and live well, my friends.